Taiwan is set to spend a record amount on defense next year, but is it enough?
Taiwan has won its 5th medal in 4 days at the 2024 Olympics. We have more for you live from here in Paris.
Pulling no punches, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz makes a big entrance as Kamala Harris's running mate in the U.S. presidential race. Plus, Taiwan's godmother of English education dies at the age of 98. We take a look at the remarkable life of Doris Browham. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Joyce Tseng. Taiwan's government is planning for a record boost in defense spending next year as the country looks for new ways to invest in its security. Jaime Ocon takes a closer look.
For the 8th year in a row, Taiwan is set to spend a record amount on its national defense. Taiwan's presidential office made the announcement late on Tuesday, confirming plans for the country to spend roughly $19.7 billion on its military in 2025.
The budget increase speaks to a couple things. First off, that Taiwan is taking its defense more seriously. It's positive to see a year-on-year growth in the defense budget. Ideally, given the magnitude of the threat that China poses, it'd be great to see that get to like 2.5, even like 3% of GDP.
Eyeing the threat of invasion from neighboring China, also known as the PRC, which claims Taiwan as its own, Taiwanese authorities have doubled down on investing in defense. Taiwan's military budget has continued to rise from $9.7 billion in 2016 to now a possible $20 billion. The budget would help fund new training programs for military personnel, maintenance for advanced systems bought from the U.S., and development of new domestically made weapons. But many analysts say that all of this is still not enough.
Taiwan should be aiming for 4, 5, even 6% of GDP. You can look at countries like Israel, South Korea, and others that face existential threats and what they spend on defense, and Taiwan's just not there. PRC pressure is going to increase over the next 4 years, and all of that takes resources to address. Everything from fuel to maintenance on airframes, and that takes money.
China's military modernization has allowed it to increase its presence in the region, sending fighter jets and warships around Taiwan on a daily basis. While the new funding is aimed at defending against an invasion, some analysts say Taiwan needs to evolve its defense strategy as well, considering other threats like a blockade.
I think the mistake around the focus on it is a singular focus to the exclusion of everything else. Sure, the kinetic D-Day style attack is a very serious challenge, both for Taiwan as well as for American, Japanese, and other military planners as we think about it. But it is not the only challenge.
While an increase in spending should, in theory, bolster Taiwan's defenses, the announcement is just the first step. The budget still needs approval from the opposition-led legislature, and then faces the question of how that money will be spent to make sure every dollar goes to where it's needed the most. Andy Shui and Jaime Ocon for TaiwanPlus.
The Defense Ministry says 36 Chinese military aircraft were spotted around the country since Tuesday morning. 31 of the aircraft entered Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, or ADIZ. This zone is not Taiwan's sovereign airspace, but is used by the military for defensive purposes. The ministry also reported 8 Chinese naval vessels operating around the country. Taiwan deployed its own aircraft, naval vessels, and coastal defense systems in response. The medals keep coming for Taiwan at the 2024 Olympics, with one more bronze added to the country's tally on Tuesday. Meanwhile, crowds turned up to the airport to welcome home Taiwan's all-conquering men's badminton gold medalists. We We now go live to Paris with Leslie Liao for an update on the latest medals and Taiwan's chances to add to the tally as the Games enter their final days. Leslie, what's been going on?
Well, Joyce, Taiwan has secured its 5th medal here at the Paris Olympics. Women's boxer Chen Nien-chin has won bronze after losing to her Chinese opponent Yang Liu in the semifinals on Tuesday. Boxing is one of those rare Olympic sports that awards 2 bronze medals, so Chen was guaranteed her medal going into her semifinal match. Chen lost by majority decision, which means that 4 out of the 5 judges sided with her opponents, but she still put up a very impressive fight. Chen came out of her corner very aggressive and very nimble, and despite losing, she was looking very positive and upbeat after the match, and she even wished her opponent well in her next fight.
今天比赛我觉得就是非常的享受啦，因为这个对手他非常的可敬，那相信他会在金牌战打出更漂亮的技战术。那我觉得就是自己能够在这场上去发挥，我觉得很不容易。那希望说就是这份祝福能够持续延续给未来的学弟妹传承，然后把这份祝福送给他们。
This is Chen Nien-chin's first Olympic medal, and it comes after unusually difficult circumstances. Chen was diagnosed with stage 2 Hodgkin's lymphoma cancer in 2019. She recovered after intense chemotherapy in 2020, and she went on to compete in the Tokyo Olympics in 2021. So her medal here today in Paris is impressive by every measure.
Certainly, Leslie. And what else is in store for Team Taiwan at the Paris Olympics?
Well, Joyce, we're in the final days of the Paris Olympics. The closing ceremony is just a few days away, but there are still chances for Taiwan to medal. Women's boxer Ling Yuting is going to fight in the 57-kilogram semifinal on Wednesday, and she's already guaranteed a medal in that fight. If she can win, she'll move on to the gold medal round. Then you have Taiwanese athletes who medaled in the Tokyo Olympics, like weightlifter Guo Xingchun and taekwondoan Luo Jialing, who haven't competed in Paris yet, so there are still definitely chances for Taiwan to make it onto the Olympic podium. But for now, Taiwan's official medal tally at the Paris Olympics sits at 1 gold and 4 bronze.
Thanks for that update, Leslie. Still some exciting news to watch out for. That was Leslie Liao reporting live from Paris. Taiwan's Olympic gold medalists and other athletes have returned home. Sandy Chi was in Taoyuan to see fans welcome them back.
A grand welcome for Taiwan's Olympic heroes at the country's main international airport. 16 athletes from sports like badminton, archery and shooting returned home to enthusiastic cheers and applause.
谢谢各位的支持，让我们可以在球场上可以坚持这么久，然后很高兴可以把这个荣耀跟大家一起分享。谢谢。
Before landing, the athletes received a special message from President Lai Ching-te on board the plane.
我要邀请大家用热烈的掌声来感谢各位选手在巴黎挑战自我，展现奋战到底的精神，不仅激励了我们，也团结了台湾。
我们也是很惊喜，可以得到总统的勉励这样子，我们就是倍感尊荣的感觉，所以我们就是真的很开心这样子。
Among the athletes arriving, all eyes are on this year's Olympic gold medalists, Li Yang and Wang Xiling. The badminton duo successfully defended their title after triumphing over their Chinese opponents by 2 games to 1 in an intense match that lasted over 70 minutes. They are the first to claim back-to-back golds in the men's doubles in Olympic history. For Li and Wang, the Olympic journey has been long and remarkable, bringing them unforgettable moments.
可能是在决赛的时候，第3局其实可能体力有点快耗尽的时候，那李阳跟我讲了一句：“你是不是美丽的？”那一句话，我想说，不能被小瞧，对，所以就把气顶了上去。对。
如果是一个瞬间的话，我自己觉得我是亲吻球场吧，因为对我来讲象征告别球场这个舞台。
For 28-year-old Li, the Summer Games marked his final Olympic appearance. He is set to transition into a new role as an associate professor at the National Taiwan Sport University. Meanwhile, badminton player Dai Ziying was also in the spotlight, with fans waiting for her arrival. One even traveled for hours from southern Taiwan, arriving at the airport at midnight, 7 hours before Dai was scheduled to land.
我觉得时间已经不是重点，就是能看到选手们才是一切都是等待都是值得的。那他今年就是带着伤还上场比赛，然后在最后他虽然败给了李胜龙，但是他还是有就是他还是跟大家说，就是他已经尽力了。但我觉得我看到的是，我看到一个超人很努力的在球场上挥拍。
But Dai didn't speak to the public at the airport and left after the group photo.
For these athletes, returning to Taiwan marks the end of their Paris Olympic journey, and they will continue to cheer for other fellow athletes that are still competing in Paris as they strive for glory. Klein Wong and Sandy Shi, Interim for TaiwanPlus.
Cuban wrestler Mijaín Lopez has become the first athlete in history to win 5 Olympic golds in a row in the same event. Lopez beat Chile's Yasmani Acosta in the men's Greco-Roman 130-kilogram finals in Paris on Tuesday, securing his record-breaking win. The 41-year-old grappler has now won gold in every Olympics since Beijing 2008. He left his shoes on the mat after his victory, signaling his retirement. Crowds gathered in his home country of Cuba to watch, then celebrate his win.
Ya esta es la quinta consecutiva, eso no lo logra nadie, solo él es el orgullo cubano para nosotros, de verdad.
Taiwan's top court has heard heated arguments over new powers legislators granted themselves in May. The move is a major partisan fault line in the country, and as John Van Trieste reports, the legal battle is proving just as divisive.
A controversy that stirred up the country is heard at the Constitutional Court. An opposition coalition in the legislature voted to expand lawmakers' powers in May. They argue it's a necessary part of legislative reform. But opponents from the ruling Democratic Progressive Party see a potentially dangerous overreach. After brawls in the chamber and rallies on Taipei's streets, it's time for the country's highest judges to decide who's right and whether the new rules will stand. There is a lot for them to sort through. Perhaps the biggest controversy is over provisions that would let lawmakers call in officials for questioning and punish them with fines or prison time if legislators judge their answers to be false or incomplete. Representatives of the ruling party are concerned about how the questioning process may play out and whether officials will be allowed to make their points without interference. But supporters of the changes say rules about such questions have been in place for a long time already.
反质询呢是我国法制上已经使用了20多年的用语，被质询者呢跳脱了被质疑跟被诘问的地位，对询问者呢质询者去诘问、质疑、攻讦。
They also say other countries' legislatures have penalties for perjury. The justices heard hours of debate, but they didn't just listen. Another controversial rule requires the president to give an annual State of the Nation address to lawmakers and take their questions. On this point, at least one judge told the opposing sides to sort out their differences themselves.
麻烦立法院自己去把这一条删掉，但是也请总统履行他的承诺也好，义务也好，到立法院去做他该做的报告。这是我的建议啦。
These are just the opening moments in deliberations expected to take at least 3 months. But one of the biggest political storms in recent years could be on its way to resolution. Scott Huang and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
The Indonesian crew of a Taiwan fishing ship say they were forced to work for 15 months and have yet to receive their salary. As Rick Lauert reports, activists are warning that this is not an isolated incident.
Here at Taiwan's Legislative UN, activists are calling for more to be done to protect migrant fishers in the country. They're pointing to a case of 10 Indonesian migrant fishers who say they worked for 15 months under terrible conditions on a Taiwan-flagged vessel but did not receive their salary.
Tidak dapat diterima jika pekerja migran seperti kami dipaksa bekerja selama lebih dari 1 tahun tanpa dibayar. Kami berharap kasus kami akan menghasilkan kebijakan yang bermakna dan mencegah orang lain menghadapi situasi yang serupa.
Activists and workers here say that Taiwan authorities have promised to make up the shortfall in these fishers' salaries, but they're warning that the problems they've faced are not unusual. They're calling on the government and big companies to do more to clean up what has become a rotten industry. Luffy Li and Rick Lowett in Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
A Thai court has ordered the opposition Move Forward party be dissolved. The Constitutional Court's ruling was based on the party's efforts to reform the country's laws on criticizing the monarchy. The ruling also bans party officials from running for office for 10 years. Move Forward won the most seats in elections last year, but didn't get enough support from the country's military establishment to form a government. Nobel Peace Prize laureate Muhammad Yunus will lead Bangladesh's interim government after the country's prime minister resigned and fled the country. Yunus was decided as interim leader during a meeting between President Mohammad Shahabuddin, student protesters, military chiefs, and civilian leaders. The country's parliament has also been dissolved, clearing the way for new elections. Former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's resignation came amid months-long anti-government protests over accusations of corruption and police brutality. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris has picked Minnesota Governor Tim Walz as her running mate for her bid for the White House in November. Appearing together at a rally for the first time in Pennsylvania, the duo is kicking off a 5-day tour through battleground states. A roaring crowd in Philadelphia as U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris takes the stage for the first time with her newly announced running mate, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz.
Since the day that I announced my candidacy, I set out to find a partner who can help build this brighter future. So Pennsylvania, I'm here today because I found such a leader.
A U.S. Army National Guard veteran and former member of Congress, Walz began as a school teacher, also spending about a year teaching in China. When he turned to politics, he became known for winning over rural white voters, a demographic that over the years has leaned towards Republican candidate Donald Trump. Now, Walz is coming into his VP nomination swinging, restating a view that his Republican rivals are, simply put, odd.
I just have to say it. You know it, you feel it. These guys are creepy and, yes, just weird as hell. And make no mistake, violent crime was up under Donald Trump. That's not even counting the crimes he committed.
Even before Walz was shortlisted as a VP pick, the Minnesota governor was branding Trump and Republican VP candidate J.D. Vance as, quote, weird, a tagline that went viral on social media. The message added on to Harris's early campaigning momentum, having raked in a record-breaking over $300 million just in July, since being catapulted to the top of the Democratic ticket after President Joe Biden ended his re-election campaign. Meanwhile, also in Philadelphia, Vance is extending his jabs at Harris to Walz, calling them both dangerously liberal.
He is the double-down choice for failed leadership. And again, Kamala Harris selected him. I don't know why, but I think it's because she's fundamentally a radical herself and she wanted a partner in crime.
Both Vance and Walz said they're willing to debate one another, an event still up in the air for their presidential candidates after Trump pulled out of a scheduled September debate on ABC, a major U.S. network, saying he'd only face Harris in a debate hosted by Fox News, a conservative-leaning channel. With time ticking in an unprecedented election season, stakes are high for both parties.
In these final 90 days, I think both sides have to be worried about everything. There is no way that over the course of the last month, we would have expected what we have seen. We wouldn't have expected a debate performance like Joe Biden had. We wouldn't have expected an assassination attempt. We wouldn't have expected a sitting president to decide that he's not seeking re-election. And we wouldn't have expected J.D. Vance to emerge initially as so compelling a figure in politics and fall so quickly. So I would be very, very nervous on both sides of the aisle. There's no telling what can happen.
With 90 days to go, the new Democratic ticket, Harris and Walz, will be making their way through critical swing states, including Wisconsin, Arizona, and Nevada, while the Republican competition works to do the same as the race for the White House heats up. Chen and Joyce for TaiwanPlus. With the U.S. election less than 100 days away, a new survey looks at how Taiwanese people view the candidates. Political scientist Lev Nogman is one of the authors of the poll by the U.S.-based Brookings Institution. Rick Lowert spoke to him about their findings.
So you've been doing some research about the upcoming U.S. elections, Democrats versus Republicans. Who does Taiwan prefer?
So in 2020, there was a narrative that really sort of dominated the foreign policy world that came from this YouGov poll that was conducted that showed that Taiwan was one of the only places in the world that preferred Trump and a Republican administration to Biden and a Democratic administration. And so, 4 years later, we've had 4 years of Biden, of Democratic administrations, and we wanted to ask whether or not people in Taiwan still feel the same way. And what we found was really counterintuitive to what most narratives about Taiwan would say. Rather than seeing overt support for Trump and Republicans, we actually find more support for Biden and Democrats across all sorts of questions and categories.
And what are the factors at play here that make Taiwanese people feel differently towards different political parties, different political leaders?
I think there is often this perception, especially before the Biden administration, that Democrats are weak on Taiwan, or that they don't care about Taiwan, or that Republicans are overtly more supportive of Taiwan. Now, of course, if you look at American voting records, you see that to be empirically not true, that Democrats and Republicans vote unanimously across partisan lines in support of Taiwan. But ever since the Biden administration has come into office, I really think it's been a moment of learning for people in Taiwan to see that you can still have an incredibly solid U.S.-Taiwan relationship regardless of who the president of the United States is. And whether it's been, say, Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan or the sheer number of bills in support of Taiwan that have passed under the Biden administration, I think this combined with the increasing number of skepticism towards Trump, especially given his recent comments on how Taiwan ought to be paying the United States more for protection.
Can you tell us how attitudes in Taiwan are changing towards the US when it comes to trusting that the US has Taiwan's back?
Yeah, so this is a bit of an enigma for a lot of us who study Taiwanese public opinion, is on one hand, we see more and more people in Taiwan confident that the United States would help support Taiwan in the event of a conflict with the PRC. At the same time, we see polling numbers that show across different polls that the United States is not seen as a trustworthy ally by people in Taiwan. It's something that my survey data has found, and it's something that other Taiwanese survey researchers have also found. So what this tells us is that on one hand, people here are confident that the United States would help Taiwan in the event of a conflict, but that the United States itself may not necessarily be a trustworthy ally. Even though these two things may seem contradictory, I think given Taiwan's very contentious geopolitical position, I think this is really just Taiwanese respondents trying to rationalize and make sense of their position in the world and the complexities behind allying with the United States.
That was political scientist Lev Nogman speaking about a recent survey on how Taiwanese view the U.S. election. A pioneer in English teaching in Taiwan has died at the age of 98. Irene Lin looks back at Doris Brown's enormous legacy in education here.
You will have a passport.
Wow, a passport for me.
Receiving her Taiwanese passport from the hands of then President Tsai Ing-wen only a year ago, Doris Brown, an American-born Taiwanese educator and missionary, has died at the age of 98. Coming from Seattle to Taiwan on a Christian mission in the 1950s, Brown spent the remainder of her life fostering English language education in the country.
What keeps me here is the fact that there's still a need for learning, and I came here to help, and they still can use some help.
Brown said she had always felt Taiwanese. After spending her early years teaching and living in indigenous communities in Hualien on Taiwan's east coast. Over the years, her reach extended to the rest of the country, touching English learners across age groups in classrooms and through radio and print, as she recruited more teachers to join her. In 2007, the company started uploading video magazines on YouTube to broaden their audience. Brown herself hosted one of the channels, which she called Advanced.
Let's get some tips on connecting and cracking jokes today on Advanced.
Studio Classroom is a household name. familiar to most students who have taken English at school.
因为那个时候只有空中英语，那个时候好像还没有现在那么多品牌，所以我们那个时候就是有兴趣想要学英语的同学都会很有意志力的每天起床听，因为它就只有一个时段在播，它不像现在上网按就有了。
老师应该有发过几本的空中英语杂志，然后自己或我同学也有时间也会去看一下说空中。
我们家是我爸爸先开始用，然后所以我们全家是我跟我姐姐还有我爸爸3个人都有在用。他听完的时候会自己念5遍这样。
Public figures have paid tribute to Braum's contribution to education and charitable work, including former President Tsai and the Premier Zhou Rongtai, hailing her as an eminent figure in the cultural life of the nation. With the government's stated goal to turn Taiwan into a bilingual society by 2030, and Studio Classrooms magazines as popular as ever, Braum's legacy may well live on here for generations of English language learners to come. Ryan Wu and Irene Lin for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more of our stories. Finally, check out these F-16 fighter jets performing in Jiayi. I'm Joyce. Take care and see you next time.
For more stories from Taiwan and the Paris Olympics, download the TaiwanPlus app.